think everybody's back.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in to this wonderful panel. I'm so excited to have these really great producers that are so representative of Alabama in general. They make me feel really proud to be from here and living here and producing here. Just to kind of give the overarching view, especially I want to ask these panelists to introduce themselves. But then I also want the panelists to talk about how the pandemic has affected you and your organization, or you and your farm. Tell us a little bit about your role in the food system, and also talk more about how the pandemic has affected that and your community, the people that you work with. Both kind of in general, if we look at, since March as one big lump of time, and maybe share some highlights per season. What was spring like? What was summer like? What was fall? And what do you anticipate for winter? So I'm going to start with Matthew, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and answer some of those questions.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Matthew Lawrence. I'm a co-owner with my wife and partner, Sandy. My wife's Jesse. I have a partner, Sandy, of Marble Creek Farmstead and Marble City Meats. Marble Creek is a regenerative agriculture-based livestock farm. We raise beef, pork, chicken, duck, turkey, goat, sometimes rabbits and geese, and we do eggs as well. We have a USDA inspected abattoir on the farm. I think we're one of the very few farms in the country that have both red meat and poultry on the farm, that has the butchering as well. I'm very fond of ASAN, been a part of ASAN for a long time. I was a previous board member. Actually, a lot of my career has centered around things I've learned from ASAN conferences. I probably would not be a meat processor if it wasn't for the Food and Farm Forum that was held over at Petals from the Past a few years back. Just seeing that as a huge challenge to our food system, and it certainly has been very central in COVID. So as a farmer and a meat processor, certainly our business has been dramatically impacted in positive and negative ways through COVID. As a meat processor, I have the benefit and the joy of serving lots of regional farms that don't have anywhere else to get their chickens processed or their beef and pork. And so I've seen kind of how a lot of farm businesses have grown, and how some have actually not really made it. It's been really tough on some as well. So that's been kind of hard to see some kind of long farms that were around when I started that are going out through COVID. So for us, the springtime was probably the most hectic period in our 7 years of being a business. We are a large presence, have a large presence at the Pepper Place Market in Birmingham, the farmers market, and we've been doing the curbside or drive-through or online market from the start. So that required a tremendous amount of agility to roll with that. There were a lot of problems with the the software that they used to try to make that work, and they were just really awful at kind of making that a good and easy experience for the farmers and the customers, because it's brand new and we're trying to figure stuff out quickly. But it was super painful and super hard. We had a lot of employee turnover right at the beginning of the pandemic, so our processing increased dramatically, and we had to try to hire a lot of folks, in the presence of the issues around COVID. Being in a USDA inspected processing plant, there's a lot of additional restrictions on our work, and so trying to keep everybody safe and figure that out was really just a lot of a challenge. We were because of that, in early April we were on the news, and that just destroyed us. We sold more in one day than we did probably in 4 months previous, just one day, and it was really that dramatic. And luckily we had just shifted our website right before that, made a huge change to our website, or we wouldn't have been able to make it through that. But COVID is expensive, or dealing with COVID has increased our costs in a lot of ways, and that was not something that we saw right away. We didn't really have time to do the kind of analysis and accounting work that is probably really important for a business, and so there's some things that we did wrong there that we're just really in the last couple months seeing. So even though our sales were really high, we didn't really do that well from it. But we're fixing that. So all in all, I think we've been really lucky. We've had lots of scares with employees, but we've never actually had COVID in our business. And I think we've just been really lucky, because had that happened, I think it would have had a potentially disastrous outcome for our business, because our cash flow is so week to week. So the summer, I think, was better, but it was still really, really hard. We were still trying to respond to a lot of the challenges from the spring. We were growing our business. We had to shift from I think a lot of businesses went through this, right? We had to shift from a full wholesale, primarily wholesale market in terms of sales, to essentially a full retail business. And so the way you package things, the way you process things, the way you grow out your animals completely changes with that trying to serve that kind of market. So there's a lot to do. And we're still dealing with a lot of those changes and that growth in the summer. And then in the fall, I think it's really calmed down for us a lot. The sales have reduced to a more manageable level. And I think we've just gotten kind of more used to things and good to, or, able to deal with them a bit more. So, Olivia, did I miss any questions there?
Oh, no, you answered them all. No, I think you gave everyone a really good overview of who you are and what this year has been like for you. Let me go to Brennan now. Brennan, if you don't mind kind of introducing yourself and just kind of putting into context what this year has been like for you and your work.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Alice, for inviting me on this panel. I think it's important. So my name is Brennan Washington. My wife and I own a farm called Phoenix Gardens, which we started back in 2005. We're right above Atlanta, between Atlanta and Athens, Georgia. We have a small, highly diversified, highly intensive farm. We've run CSAs and all that stuff. Got a couple of hoose houses, a couple of greenhouses, and we do all this off of 2.5 acres. We've got some chickens as well. So that's my farming life. My other hat that I wear, and I do a bunch of stuff across the landscape of sustainable. I am the 1890 Land Grant Liaison and Southeastern Outreach Coordinator for Southern SARE. And SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture and Research Education. We are primarily a grant-making organization that seeks to advance the adoption and implementation of sustainable agriculture throughout the country, but in our case, in Southern SARE, throughout 13 southeastern states, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. And in my position, I work with 1890 universities, nonprofits such as ASAN, and directly, primarily with farmers of color. To find out their needs. And I also do a bunch of other stuff. I've been involved in a lot of food system development work here in Georgia and throughout some other states. I founded the Georgia Farmers Market Association. So I've been doing that type of work for quite some time now. In terms of COVID, so COVID's been really interesting. So for farms like mine, it's actually, as Matthew was saying, it's actually increased our sales. So our problem now is not having enough customers, it's having too many. Both of the farmers markets that we typically sell at went to online formats, and that's been a mixed blessing. My wife does most of the marketing and selling and stuff. She just retired recently, so she sort of runs the farm while I do my other work. But you lose that in-person contact that I know we all are missing right now. When you go to the market and be able to chat folks up, but it's also shown there's been some real efficiencies that we can build on as we move forward. You know, it's kind of nice to be able to have a market just send you a pick list, you drop off your orders and pick up a check. You know, that's been a lot more efficient. I think there's some things we can build on as we talk about how do we build true regional food systems. You know, that's really nice. And I'm hearing the same stories from farmers I talk to across the Southeast. But there's also been a lot of problems. Access to pandemic aid for small farmers. I don't know how many farmers we have on the call and organization. Has pretty much been non-existent. Access to technology has been a real problem because a lot of these pandemic programs, the only way you can access them is through the internet. And a lot of people either don't have the bandwidth to deal with that, or they don't have the skill sets, quite frankly. You know, not everybody can hop on a Zoom call because I know farmers don't even know what Zoom is. Our spring was good. We got all of our crops in time, and a lot of it was spoken for the minute we put in the ground. You know, unlike row croppers, small diversified farms we build our risk into our operation. So whereas a corn or peanut farm is waiting for that time, they could harvest all that stuff at once, and is subjected to, say, big storms like we saw earlier this year, or interruptions in the supply chain, which COVID has exposed. They're more at risk, but we were able to get a lot of our products sold and stuff this year. We invested in and this was before we even knew what COVID was. We did go ahead and invest with a fairly sophisticated e-commerce system, but we're finding we're not using it as much as we should, because between the two online markets that we're running, it's been serving our purpose, and we haven't had to really access that much through our market. Across the Southeast, though, and I'm going to put on my share hat for a minute, we do see a lot of issues with folks being able to help access those larger supply chains. The USDA put out this program called Farms to Families, or it was a box program that USDA put on. And in my advocacy work, this is what I look for. They announced the program on a Friday, and you had to have your application in the following Friday. And this was over the summer, and it wasn't an easy application. So those farmers who even had the capacity to fill those orders and to take part in the program really couldn't. You know, it was just like a lot of the business-related pandemic aid services. It went to the folks who already had that infrastructure in place to be able to apply for that stuff. My biggest challenge is I'm in the field all the time. You know, I'm typically in my truck driving to a state, meeting with an organization such as ASAN, or meeting with farmers, or going to conferences. And so it's been really, really frustrating for me to be sitting where I'm sitting right now. I do have some underlying health issues. So I've been, as does my wife, so I've been really, really careful, even though the temptation is there to want to get out there, about following all the mandates and the precautions and stuff. But I do think, and I hope after out of this phone call, I really do think there's some opportunities for all of us to really build more resilient food systems, not only throughout Alabama, but regionally as well. So did I answer your questions, Olivia?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Britton. I love hearing about your work, and especially since it encompasses all of the Southeast. Let me go on to Andrew. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what your organization or farm is like, and how it's been for you guys this year.
Good morning to everybody. I'm Andrew Williams, and live in West Alabama. We got several organizations that we wear hats for in different capacity. We got our flagship organization, which is a nonprofit. It's called the United Christian Community Association, and that organization We created that in 1998, I believe. So we've been around 20 years or so with that. Um, we also have an organization, for profit organization called the Deep South Food Alliance, and that's located in Linden, Alabama, and that's a processing aggregation kind of a outfit that in its starting phases and what have you. And also we have another organization that we work with called Williams Enterprises LLC, which is a family-oriented organization that encompasses a trucking company, a cattle farm, and some agricultural outreach consulting. So we probably got way too many irons in the fire, but sometimes it takes several irons to make a big pile of iron. So we're glad to be moving along with those. Uh, One of the things that we're doing, I retired from USDA NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, 12 years ago. But what we found is that we wanted to somewhat give back to the community and to the people that we kind of live around and that kind of thing. So we do a lot of volunteering in working with social disadvantaged African American limited resource farmers and what have you, kind of using that 40 years of knowledge of working with USDA to try to help bridge some of the deficiencies that we see among landowners. And what we find is in this work and trying to give back, we found that in many cases uh, we are disconnected from the land, and we are trying to help people to understand that all wealth comes from the land. And in many cases, they may own land, but they're not using the land perhaps to create wealth. And so we do a lot of consulting, one-on-one consultation with landowners, trying to connect them with opportunities within agencies and institutions that will help them to develop their land, to be able to perhaps create wealth over time, and also to be able to leave this land and what have you in a better position when it's time to transition that property to the next generation. And what we finding is in this work is that uh, a lot of time there's the need for hand holding at the farm level. And with Corbin being where it is and everything, there's a lot of regulations and what have you within agencies and institutions that prohibit on-farm consultation. In our work, uh, we adhere to the CDC things that we need to do, but we have found a way to continue to answer those farm calls and those farm visits that is needed. And then when we get to the farm, we practice social distancing and small groups and what have you. We, even if we have to have large groups, we'll have the farmers to drive up in their farm vehicles, and they stay in their vehicles, and we have workshops with them, uh, drive up like they do at church. So we've been able to we carry on with the group sessions like that, and then we still do one-on-one consultation from standing 6 feet apart and what have you, and we still make the farm visit, and everything have been working fine as we do that. Uh, we've been able to reach families through we hold a farmers market at the Deep South Food Alliance on Saturday morning, and people come in, and we are able to pass out information talk about food safety and the FISMA Act and what have you. Uh, while the customers are coming and purchasing while they practice social distancing. And we have in this work too. We have some demonstration sites that we work with, some in Mississippi and some in Alabama, and we actually practice what we preach at those demonstration sites. If we're using plastic and drip irrigation and what have you, high tunnel management, we actually have staff that actually manage these sites. And then when farmers need to see how you manage a high tunnel to be able to grow 16, 17, 1800 stalks of collard greens in a hoop house, we actually can show them how to do that. And the other thing that we do too is if they need a farm visit where we can show them how to put in the irrigation system. We got staff that we will actually go and work one-on-one with the farmer while practicing social distancing, because a lot of times they may apply for micro irrigation system through NRCS, but they may not know how to put it in. They may not have the machine to put it in. And so they will call on us, and sometimes NRCS will ask us to go and help these limited resource social disadvantaged farmers be able to apply these practices that they have applied for through the EQIP program, what have you. And through our consulting and outreach, we have agreements with several agencies that allow us to be able to make these farm visits and take staff and spend time with the farmers. And really and truly, we are under a pandemic, but the need at the community level haven't changed. And so we try to find ways and means by which we can keep ourselves and the farmers safe while we are still being able to do this work. And the other thing that we have done is that we do farm visit, and we do it Facebook Live, and we'll be able to reach many other people that way. So we're kind of excited about being able to continue to do this work while we're under the pandemic. Did I get close?
Yeah, absolutely. You got more than close. The more we know about you, the better. Let me hop on over to Natalie. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work and how this year has been for y'all.
Sure. Um, hey, my name's Natalie Bishnoi. I co-manage the Farm Food Collaborative. We are a local food hub housed at the Food Bank of North Alabama. Our program started in 2014 after our food bank conducted a study to kind of take a deeper dive into our food system and see what the barriers were for farmers at that time. So our work is kind of all over the place. It's basically, what the needs of the farmer is at that particular time, which can change from year to year and from farm to farm. But our work basically includes assisting farmers getting into wholesale markets, and wholesale markets include grocery stores, restaurants. We do a lot of farm to school, and we've done some college campuses down in Birmingham and farm to early care and education. So in addition to helping them get into these markets and connect them with these buyers, we also assist them with food safety on the farm if they need assistance with GAP certification, or they're not going to go for GAP, but we still have to make sure that they're doing things from a food safe perspective for farm to school sales. So my work pre-COVID, I was on the road constantly. I was visiting farmers and producers and attending statewide meetings everywhere. And in addition to the work that we do with the collaborative and with helping farmers and um, basically acting as kind of a broker into these wholesale markets, we also serve as the core partner for the National Farm to School Network for the state of Alabama, which means that we work closely with the Alabama Farm to School program, which is housed at the Department of Ag and Industries. And we also are on part of the co-lead team for the Alabama Farm to Early Care and Education Coalition. And we also are stakeholders with the Alabama Food Systems Collaborative. Like, we just try to continue these conversations as much as possible so that we can make real changes in our food system. A little bit kind of like this past year, it was kind of a double-edged sword. We saw significant losses in, farm to school sales, for instance, with COVID. Schools shut down unexpectedly in March, and the first start of the season in the spring is strawberries, and we usually have strawberries, hundreds of gallons going into school on any given day in 12 different school districts in North Alabama. And this year there was crickets. There was nothing. Fortunately, from the producer side of things, they had a phenomenal retail year as far as being able to sell at markets. Everybody was really, I think, trying to avoid getting into the grocery stores. And so if they saw a farmer's market or drive-through markets were super helpful. But on the flip side of that, we had less local food going into school. So that means that less students had access to these amazingly nutritious and delicious locally grown foods. So I could see both sides of that. And that was our spring. Towards the end of spring, there's always that last rush of strawberries after the schools closed. There was a little bit of that this year, not as significant in years past, which was good because, a lot of times we end up with a lot of number 2 berries, and those aren't as sellable as the other ones. So I think as far as some highlights that, we as a food hub kind of have a different perspective. So we make sure that, just like farmers and producers diversify their crops, we try to diversify our sales outlets too. We really understood, it's always been important, but we really understood the importance of that this year when, we had these significant sales drops in schools and other things like that. So, and that wasn't just for strawberries, that was for other products as well. So it was good that we had these other outlets to be able to turn to still move product. We were very fortunate that a lot of food banks got funding. And so we were actually able to sell locally grown produce in large amounts to the food banks for a fair wage. So that was awesome. The farmers weren't taking a loss. They were still making money and selling, unloading a large quantity of food at one time, just be done with it. And our neighbors in need got access to this amazingly fresh, locally grown food, which they were almost like CSA boxes for people in need. So that was a really big plus, I feel like, that came out of this. And I think overall, another big sales outlet that we had pre-pandemic was restaurant sales. And, starting in March and still to this day, restaurants are struggling. This doesn't so much impact the larger producers, but the smaller specialty producers that we work with, microgreen growers, mushroom growers, herbs, anything that's small amounts that they usually rely on that extra income from the restaurants. That's not happening right now. So that is kind of a negative aspect that we haven't really been able to find the positive side of yet. And I think overall for us, the COVID experience has helped us to since I'm not traveling on the road as much, I'm able to kind of sit down and have these virtual meetings with a lot of stakeholders in the food system. And it's really helped us to have the time to deepen these conversations in ways that I don't think would have been possible if we'd still been driving. Everybody's got to meet in one spot and you've got to factor in that drive time and all of that. And now we just have to log on, which the Zoom meeting, it's good and bad. I see both sides, but the really good part of it is that we've been able to really dig deep this year and really take a look at what we are missing in our food system, and kind of try to start creating a plan from a lot of different participants within the food system, which is what needs to happen. It shouldn't just be top down, somebody's making all the decisions. There are so many growers and people involved that need to be in the conversation as well, which they are now. So it's good. Obviously we need to be more. There needs to be more. I always feel like I want everybody to be able to get into a big room and just talk about it and solve our problems. So I think I answered questions. Did I do okay?
Yeah, no, you did perfect.
Okay.
Like I said, just the more we know about you, the better. I love everything you do. So now we're going to kind of move into some more formal questions for the panelists. I'm actually going to combine a couple of our questions so that we can get the full story from y'all. I know that some of y'all have touched a bit on this already in your intros, but where have you struggled or failed this year? And what have you learned from that? Let us know anything that you may not have already mentioned in your intro. Let me start with Brennan.
Okay. As for the farm, we've been okay. We're just fortunate. We've been able to do okay. So not much in the way of struggles, maybe how to do better marketing when you're in an online world. But most of the other stuff we've been doing okay with. In my larger work, I've had some struggles. One is maintaining the level of outreach that I am used to doing, and that, quite frankly, the farmers that I work with and organizations that I work with really need. It's been a struggle to, so for example, SARE puts out, for those of you who don't know SARE, we're primarily a grants making organization. We try to advance the goals of sustainable ag through 6 or 7 different grant programs. Sometimes money comes back for these grants for a variety of reasons, and we've always used that money to fund things like this forum we're doing today, to help sponsor and help organizations pay these costs and stuff. And typically we push quite a bit of money out the door each year because we don't want to send it back to Washington. Well, guess what? Nobody's doing in-person conferences, and conferences that you do online, while it's filling the gap, that money, it's just cheaper. That's the bottom line. It's just cheaper to do those type of things. So we've had to shift our thinking, and how do we continue to support organizations like ASAN within the guidelines that we have to spend this money. And it's been a challenge for the organizations that we deal with. It's been a challenge that, how do you hold an online conference? How do I move my conference online? And I'm going to put in a plug for ASAN here. This is probably one of the best ones that I've seen organized. So kudos to ASAN. But how do you move that? How do I get my farmers to attend these things when their technical literacy is not at the level where it should be? And then mainly just you losing that person-to-person contact, where you're standing in the middle of somebody's field, or you're standing in the offices of an NGO, and being able to really dig down and get deep into what their problems are and how we can help. The one thing that I've been hearing from across the region, and this has been consistent throughout the Southeast, is just the problems with certain classes of farmers being notified about USDA programs. I got a call from a hog farmer down in South Georgia right after COVID hit, and they was talking about relief packages. And he was telling me, Brennan, not only are they doing this stuff online, we don't even hear about this stuff. Some of the agencies moved the bulk of their work to the bulk of their interactions with their clients online, which cut a large number of people out. A lot of organizations like 1890s and nonprofits, they are able to hold conferences such as this, but their attendance and participation rates have been a fraction of what they would be if they were having a in-person conference. So that's been pretty frustrating. Another thing that I'm seeing is that there are people who've been doing this work for quite some time, trying to build local food systems, trying to help out small and medium-sized regional farms. And I've been noticing across the region that larger farms who before March, didn't really give a flying flip about what's happening in local food system development, that they're starting to encroach upon the spaces that we started to create for ourselves. So for example, up in Gainesville, Georgia, they call that the chicken capital of the United States. They were actually having trucks come down from their processing facilities and going into areas where you would see more traditional farmers markets and selling chicken. So what does that do to the actual poultry farmers who were there? So they're moving that model. And I also see organizations, and Alice had posted about this on Facebook last night, who see this as an opportunity to come in and establish their bona fides as local food organizations where there really aren't, and just want to suck that knowledge out of the organizations who have been doing this work. So that's been a challenge. And I've mentioned the technology several times. That's a big issue all across the South, not only in terms of agriculture, but those of you who have children know that's been an issue when you're trying to do educating your children at home or virtually. Some parents, they have to work, so how they're going to do that? Some parents didn't have the financial wherewithal to have laptops or to have broadband. So that's been a struggle. Those are the biggies, I think, and obviously money. Money is, I always hear from farmers, look, we don't want you to come do another survey. We need cash, we need money. And I think what this pandemic has exposed is that even those farmers who thought they were doing okay, it just took one hiccup in the system for them to, face some serious financial issues. And, especially for Black farmers and farmers of color, those issues can invariably lead to loss of land, to land loss, which is a major problem. So those are the challenges and struggles that I'm dealing with, and I'm sure many of you are dealing with that's on this call.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brennan. I'll go to Andrew. Same question to you. What has been one thing that you've struggled with that you might not have named in your bio? And what have you learned from that moving forward?
Like I said in the introduction, a lot of our work is outreach and one-on-one consultation with landowners. And what we have found is that we've been effective in working with USDA agencies and getting them into their system, utilizing their programs like EQIP and CSP, Conservation Stewardship, and what have you. But what we have failed at, I think, is that once the landowner is successful in getting a contract through USDA, then the failure have been, and sometimes they can't implement the contract. And we've been having to go out and try to bridge that gap because of financial reasons or other hardships. And so I wouldn't say that that's a failure, but that's a challenge in trying to make that work when there's limited resources. One of the other things that we have been trying to do is trying to increase the production of vegetables within the region where we work. And what we're finding is a lot of the farmers are getting up in age and wanting to retire and what have you, and we don't have younger farmers, if you will, to replace them. So that's another challenge. So we're trying to encourage the existing farmers to continue to uh, produce, so we won't have a drought as it relates to vegetables in our area. So that's a challenge. We did a pilot project this summer where we got some existing older farmers to put in a project, a Purple Hull Pea project, with the idea of that we was going to work the farm to school program. And cause that for us working the school program, the cafeterias were in operation. So that was a challenge, maybe not a failure, but a challenge. So we used those products on the general market and in the farmers market. So it wasn't a complete failure, but it was a challenge. I guess the failure is depending on the region that you're working, but finding product within a proximity, in terms of transportation, to make it efficient. That is a problem that it's going to take some time to overcome. And the other piece of that, the overarching piece, is being able to encourage uh, younger producers to come online and be able to defend that you can make a living wage if you stop doing what you're doing and become a farmer. That's not a failure, but that's a challenge because we're still struggling and trying to bridge that gap. And so when you start looking at the profit line, when you're trying to farm, it's challenging to be able to take care of family on the farm, even at whatever level. The last challenge that I would talk about instead of a problem is that out of all our knowledge in this country and in program in agencies and institutions, there's a need in an area where there's not enough young farmers. Is that we need to develop a safety net, a kind of an incubation system with a financial safety net for 3 to 5 years, so we can be able to help overcome that drought that we have as relates to younger producers and producing vegetables and what have you in certain regions. So I don't like failures, but I do like working challenges.
I think being involved in anything related to the earth or agriculture is always going to bring challenges, and you have to be that type of person where you love it. So I really love that piece of wisdom that you just dropped, to look at them as challenges instead of failures. Natalie, same question to you. What has been something that you have failed or struggled with, and how have you learned? What have you learned from that?
Um, on a personal level, I've just been struggling, I think, with shifting my life from being on the road all the time to being home. We have high risk people in our household and uh, virtual schooling children, and it's just a wild ride. But I think as far as challenges, oh goodness, um, for as there just seems to be a lot of different. There's a myriad of challenges in Alabama. Um, I think, you know, for us especially, we have being housed at a nonprofit gives us a great amount of flexibility, because we are able to focus on our mission and not the overall profit. We're not profit driven, which I think is important when it comes to working with producers and trying to help them get into wholesale markets. We don't have a lot of assistance with that as far as partners like distributors and things. They don't want to pay fair prices, and that's something that we feel is part of building a just food system, is paying fair wages and fair prices for this product that they worked so hard on. I feel like this year has really taught us that we just kind of have to take the wins when we get them and adjust accordingly to the losses. In the agriculture field, there's always going to be losses, whether it's crops, sales, employees, I mean, all of it, but you have to figure out how to adjust. And so you have to be flexible and nimble and able to pivot whenever you need to. And I think that that can be a challenge for some producers to be able to have that flexibility to pivot. I think we need, on a statewide level, maybe more support for organizations that are doing the work, that are the boots on the ground, folks like Andrew and ASAN, and I don't see a lot of support from the people in power, and by that I mean like from the state, the state Department of Agriculture, things like that. There's just not a lot of they don't want to connect with other organizations. They just want to like focus on the ag world, but we're all here doing this work and we're all a part of the ag world and we're all important, very important pieces. ASAN is incredibly important in being resources for smaller producers and growers. We don't have anything else like that here. Where would anybody get this type of information if we didn't have groups like ASAN working so hard? And I think that ties right into like part of the struggles with like achieving any type of food justice in Alabama is a little bit difficult because there's still so much work that needs to be done, and it has to come from these people in power. And when there's a lack of even acknowledgement that there needs to be food justice, conversations happening, it's really frustrating. And I'm grateful for groups like ASAN that give us that space and encourage these conversations, because it's all a part of creating a whole and just food system, and not only in Alabama, but across the Southeast. Brennan mentioned in the chat box, and I was part of what I was going to touch on as well, as one of our challenges is a severe lack of infrastructure to help us achieve a sustainable food system in Alabama. Lack of cold storage, that's expensive. That's a problem for producers. That's a problem for us as a food hub. Lack of cold storage, lack of transportation that has cold storage capability so that you can keep the cold chain from point A to point B. Again, we're very fortunate, being at a nonprofit, that we have access to refrigerated vehicles. But I was just speaking to Andrew about getting product from their food hub to our food hub, and there's a 3-hour difference. And it'd be cool if we could meet in the middle, but there's not a way to keep that cold chain the whole way, so we need to figure that out and have these conversations. I think is how we're going to figure that out. But and processing facilities, I can't tell you how many times I have deeply wished that we had a way to process things, especially when in terms of farm to school sales, and even
Hey Natalie, let me sorry to interrupt you. I think maybe your audio, something changed about your audio just now. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Did it come back?
I just got it. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Okay, maybe that's better. Keep talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it
Okay.
fixed
I,
itself.
it said that my microphone went out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyways,
Cool.
you know, these kitchens and cafeterias, it would mean the world, you know, what Andrew and Daryl do down there at Deep South Food Alliance, and they can process and chop greens, and that is huge. Um, that is huge for any buyer, you know, because that work is already done. It's convenient, and we could most of our harvest season falls in the summertime, and for us, whatever farmers aren't selling at farmers markets and farm stands, any of that extra that they try to sell to wholesale, that would really be beneficial to have it already processed, especially when it comes to fruits and things like that. So strawberries, peaches, blueberries, anything like that. We did a pilot project where we froze some blueberries for schools, and they loved it. I would love to have that on a larger scale, but we don't have that infrastructure built yet.
Infrastructure is so major, and I don't think a lot could be accomplished without it. I remember last year at the forum, someone said, you know, it's like building a road, and you're like looking at a field, but you need to build a road, and you know, your heart wants to just kind of like just start running through it to make it a road, but there are steps that have to be made to make it a road. So understanding that completely. Matthew, same question to you.
Yeah, so we have struggled a lot. We failed a lot. I think that's something we do really well is fail. We fail all the time. And this has been one of the most challenging events of my life and certainly of our business's existence. And we failed a lot. You know, I'll just list a couple of things that I think are important and maybe focus on one or two. But so predicting demand has been impossible for us, right? Like as I mentioned, we moved from a primarily wholesale business to a retail business. And you know, a lot of our customers were shifting to more direct sales, or we do home delivery. So that was super pop. We'd already been doing that for a long time. We ship a lot. So our shipping like really took off post COVID. And but at the same time, UPS was awful and would lose packages all the time. And so that was costing, but they wouldn't insure it. So really just predicting demand and having some kind of way to be stable at that, both from a product perspective and a processing needs perspective, right? So when there's a shortage of meat, you can't really grow a cow out or a pig in enough time to really kind of meet this, but you can grow a lot more chickens. And so everybody, like, I think our poultry processing business quadrupled this year in terms of what we were doing. And we were breaking all of our infrastructure. I mean, I felt like a one-man mechanic band, right? Like with 100 spinning plates trying to like keep every scalder and plucker and whatever running all day. It was a lot. So, you know, to that, redundancy was the biggest thing, redundancy in infrastructure. So, you know, we had carcass coolers go out, freezers go out. I mean, every piece of equipment we had was running at 100% capacity. And when you do that, you're going to lose equipment. And in a COVID world, it's really challenging to get people to come out. The supply chains get super long. You know, I mean, if you are like between the farm and the processing plant, we've got over 800 items that we buy on a somewhat regular basis, right? I mean, and a lot of that stuff's coming from all over the world. And the time to get that stuff to us was really challenging. You know, and so often one piece can stop your ability to actually get to the end of this long process of taking, you know, in my case, a baby chick and turning that into a packaged piece of meat that somebody can buy. There's just many parts that go into doing that successfully and well. We have struggled really hard with getting our employees who are very local to our somewhat rural location in Sylacauga to take the pandemic seriously. That's been a huge struggle for us. We just cannot get our employees to take this. My family's the same way. It's just been really hard. So we've had to get pretty aggressive on like discipline, which is awful, but it's what's required to get people to know that we mean if you work without a mask, we're going to have to not have you here. And that's really impossible when it's 100 degrees outside and you're in the heat, or if, you know, and you're in a plant cutting meat or, slaughtering a chicken, you don't really want to wear a mask in those environments. It's really challenging. So that's been really hard. It's a lot more, it has been a lot more, when you run at 100 or 110% of your capacity, both in the farm and the processing, you're much more inefficient. And that inefficiency is costly. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we made over the first 6 months of this is we didn't increase our prices at all. And when I went back and did an analysis, our cost of production was anywhere, depending on what we're talking about, anywhere from 10 to 20% higher to actually get our products to customers and out the door, just because either input costs had gone up really quickly, things ran out, or again, people are just super tired. They make mistakes. Their, per unit production goes down. And I think that's totally reasonable. We're just trying to work with a mask on. It's super hard to do it fast and do quality work, right? So I think that was really a big struggle. For me personally, me and my wife both have this personality of just trying to meet every challenge and every demand as it comes up and take every opportunity and just really go with it. And I think that's come at a really big cost to our health and to our family's happiness, right? Like through this, we have probably pushed ourselves harder than we ever have. And we tend to be pretty hard pushing folks. And we just did not take the time to rest and heal properly. And, I got really burnt out, I've gotten sick, I've gotten depressed. I mean, all the things that are super negative from this work have happened in a time when we've had the most business we've had. I guess I would say we've done it better than we've ever done it. We've really, I think, overcome a lot. I felt the worst about our business. And so I know that comes from, not really taking the proper time to rest and heal. And so I just encourage everyone here to give yourself like all the slack in the world, because this is awful. It's been super hard. This work's really tough. All the time it's tough. And in this environment, I think it's just been like super hard. So, so I think as far as solutions to some of those things, for us, building redundancy into our systems has been super important, right? So we have, added, like if you're going to build refrigeration, to your point, Natalie, add 2 condensing units. Don't just do 1, right? At least have a spare compressor on hand, right? Because you can't get one on short notice. And if that refrigeration goes out and you as a business have accepted someone's product and now it's ruined, like it's just, how do you recover from that, right? So having that redundancy in systems and equipment and personnel and training, I think is super, super key. And so in our business planning and in our day-to-day, we're really focused on redundancy and contingency planning. Inputs, right? So like I mentioned, we have lots and lots of inputs. So we're now kind of trying to predict our input use 4 to 6 months in advance and keeping a stockpile. We've got a big shipping container. We just keep it in, trying to keep 4 to 6 months worth of inputs on hand at all times. So that keeps us ahead of that curve. It's also like a financial buffer, right? This stuff's expensive. And so if we go through like a rougher financial period, I think it's good to have that to fall back on, right? So it's kind of like a savings account in a lot of ways too. And so of course, the biggest one is like in these times of intense growth and crisis, just really make sure we schedule time to rest and recuperate. Like that's absolutely critical. And, I'm going to Gatlinburg in 2 weeks for a whole week in a cabin with the family, shutting the whole business down. So I'm really excited about that. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Also want to name and also thank you again for sharing your vulnerability. I think it's really important for us to all acknowledge that this year has been impossible in a lot of different ways. And so I really do want to thank you for sharing those hardships, the mental health struggles. I think it's really important to share that with everyone here. And so thank you for creating a really great space for that with your honesty. So we're a little over on time. So I'm going to ask one last question for the panelists, kind of just to round out the session. Y'all are all individual growers and you represent individual entities that are also really reflected throughout the state. But you also have important perspectives on the larger food system and how it all interconnects. Up to now, we've touched on the gaps and the weak points in the food system that have been revealed or exacerbated by COVID. So in your opinion, what's one thing that we should do moving forward to fill these gaps in order to collectively build a stronger and more equitable food system in Alabama and the Southeast at large? I know this is a really big question and it's so hard to limit to just one thing. But since we're limited on time, yes, just reflect on one thing that we should do moving forward to fill these gaps. I'm going to start with Natalie. I think you're muted, Natalie.
So I'm trying not to get feedback because now I can't hear, but you can't hear me on my phone. So I don't know what's happening.
Okay.
I think communication is what we need. Conversations, keep the conversation going. Yeah, communicate. I'm struggling with it, as you can tell, but it's a necessity. We need to keep these conversations going. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll pop back over to Matthew. What's one thing that we should do? Oops, there's an echo. Yeah, what's one thing we should do moving forward to fill these gaps to make Alabama's food system more just and equitable?
From my perspective, what I can speak to from my own experience probably is I think anything we can do to cooperate we have so many good organizations and so many people doing great work, and I know ASAN tries really hard to bring those groups together. But I think anything we can do, like I have tons of infrastructure and space that we use a lot of it, but it's not always utilized. And there's all kinds of like educational opportunities that exist here. And I'm always super open to share those with anybody, but I don't ever actually end up doing that. Right. So just ways that we can, I don't network and cooperate more, especially across, different groups, I think is really important. Right. So, I'll make myself as available as I can be to help in any way possible. But I think as much cooperative effort is key.
Cooperation is major, and thank you for offering that up. We'll jump to Brennan. What's one thing we should do moving forward to fill the gaps?
I think now that we know the challenges and opportunities, we really need to sit down and figure out how do we sustainably finance this work. Because all the work we've talked about and all the challenges, at the end of the day, it comes down to a lot of 90% of it, 80% of it comes down to adequate funding. And we need to start to really have some serious conversations about how we can sustainably fund this work. So
money makes the world go round, unfortunately. Yeah, that's so true. Definitely looking to support that more. Andrew, last question. What's one thing that we should do to fill the gaps to make Alabama's food system more strong, to make it stronger and more equitable?
Well, I think I go back to something that I said earlier. I think if we could develop a financial safety net to encourage and engage younger people in food systems, I think if we say it enough, Natalie, it showed up yesterday in the meeting we was in. Because we got to keep preaching that, and I think that's the one thing will bridge a lot of the equity gaps that we see in this work.
Absolutely. As a young farmer, I feel like I'm answering the calling, and I know a lot of people even on this call are doing the same. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists. We have a few minutes, so if anyone has a question that you would like to drop into the chat for any of our panelists, for me, for Alice, for if you want to learn more about ASAN, or if you just have a question about anything that was said today on this call. Anybody got one?
I think that as we sit here and listen today and everything, I think that we may not know what's going on in each other's region. Matthew talked about some of the things that he's doing, but I didn't know that. I do now. But I think at some point, if we could do some cross-regional um, communication efforts or something, that would be helpful. Nally and I talked about some of the things that North Alabama and West Alabama could do. So we need a mechanism, if you will, to facilitate that down the road somewhere.
I love that. Just bringing the whole state together. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here, for showing up, for creating this really great space. It means a lot. I think everyone here at ASAN, we've been really making sure that this forum is as great as it could be. So it wouldn't be that way without you, without our panelists. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Alice real quick.
Yeah. Yes, big thanks again to everyone on the panel and to Olivia for moderating. Thank y'all for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today. We are towards the beginning of a long series of sessions that we've got planned for the next 10 days. So hopefully you've checked out the lineup. It is incredible, if I don't mind saying so. The entire ASAN staff and forum planning committee and like an amazing lineup of session leaders has come together to make this forum possible. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat to where you can learn more about the sessions. I also want to invite you to give to ASAN, to become a member, renew your membership, bring your friends and family into ASAN, you know, some gift memberships for the holidays. So if you want to learn more about membership, I'm going to drop another link in the chat for that. And then lastly, we will close with just a very short poll to give feedback on this session. And I'm going to try to start that now. Let's see. Olivia, are you the host?
I should not. I don't think so.
Okay.
It might be.
I'm going to